Welcome to Rick on Life, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Media Project. This is where we love to talk about things that impact our daily lives. Today, we're going to be talking about how to rewrite the scripts of our lives with John Ramstead. John is CEO of Eternal Leadership Consulting. He's the executive coach with the Ramstead Group. John coaches and consults with Fortune 100 CEOs, startup entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and has been named as a preferred leadership trainer for the U.S. military. John has 25 years business management experience. He's also co-host of the internationally known Eternal Leadership podcast, which was recently named by Inc. magazine as the number 12 podcast leaders need to listen to. He's a startup entrepreneur, a Fortune 500 management team member. He's a former Navy Lieutenant Commander and F-14 fighter pilot. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering. And John has been married to his best friend for 28 years and has 3 sons. John, welcome to Rick on Life. It's exciting to have you.
Great to be on, Rick. You're awesome. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, happy Veterans Day.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. And to anybody else listening, to all the veterans and their families, thank you so much for your service, man. I didn't get to do what I did without a lot of other amazing people doing their jobs.
I want to tease you because this has got to be a highlight for you as a former Navy pilot to spend some time with a former Marine.
Yes, thank you for your service.
Hey, listen, John, we all have a story. But I would be hard-pressed to find someone with a more remarkable story than you have. And so let's just start there and give us the rundown of your personal story.
Oh, my goodness. Where do you want me to start, Rick?
Well, start prior to the big accident, of course.
Well, it's interesting. Growing up, my grandpa immigrated here from Norway in 1910 and could barely speak English and enlisted in the U.S. Army to fight in World War I. That always really, just really struck me at my core, right? Like, his passion and love for the country. My dad fought in World War II in the Pacific, and I always knew I was going to go in the military. So I chose going in the Navy and was very fortunate, became a fighter pilot. My dad gave me some incredible advice going down into flight school, which Top Gun had just come out. This was in 1988. Top Gun came out in 86, so it was incredibly competitive. And he told me, hey, there's somebody down there who is the ace of the base, another student everybody's talking about. Go find him, buy him a beer, and ask him what he did. And I found that guy. His name was John, and became a great friend and mentor, but he had a totally different philosophy on how to prepare and train. And I took that into my, everything I did, and was able to graduate number 1 and choose to fly F-14s, which was pretty awesome. But you know what it was? It taught me to go in life, reach out for mentors and find people that can help you, and then take their advice and actually do it. It's interesting because I shared with a lot of people what I had done, and they didn't take that advice. But anyway, I was in the Gulf War, Desert Storm back in, the early 90s, and I had just gotten orders to go to Top Gun as a student, to go through it. And then I was playing softball, Rick, and I got hit with a line drive in my right eye, blew out the back of my eye socket, and had nerve damage, and I was done. So I found myself in January 95, out on the street trying to find a job. Had an electrical engineering degree I'd never used. Nobody would hire me. I'd been in the military for 8 years. I was a pilot who couldn't fly. And it was through that process that 2 things happened. First one is met some incredible mentors in business, but it was those men that led me to my faith, in business. So this is kind of God starting to line things up. and they helped me get my first job that did well, but then decided I didn't really like being an employee, so I'm going to go start a company. So I moved back to Minnesota, ended up doing 3 tech startups in the hardware and software area, data mining, services, and then man, I was working crazy hours. I was working, sometimes 80, 90 hours a week, traveling constantly, and realized I wasn't going to have a relationship with my kids. I was never home.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't want to be that dad. And I had a huge decision to make because I was about to get a promotion at this our company. We kind of moved up the chain, and I was on a management team of that Fortune 100 company. And the next level of promotion would have been double my income, same hours, but in way more travel. And I actually chose to leave technology, and actually wasn't that hard of a decision. I think God just opened the door. I was sitting in my office and I got a phone call from somebody saying, I know things are going great at this company, but can I run something by you? I ended up joining a Wall Street firm, becoming a financial consultant, building a practice right there in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I was, not even traveling, home every night, unless I was going out with my wife. And then they moved me to Denver, Colorado, where I'm at now in 2008, to help grow their office out here. And that was character development time, my friend, because you know what happened financially 2008 and 2009. And I had just moved out here to help grow an office. And, but I got to tell you, during this period of time, man, I just became less and less happy. Didn't even know why. I was in a place where I would just call smoldering discontent. This is 2010, 11. And I decided to leave that Wall Street firm. I wanted to build something again. I met some great people here in Denver that I really respected. And so we were going to take a company and buy it and do a turnaround. See if we could rebuild this company as a small team, create some value, hire people. And it was going to be another, a lot of long hours. And it was during that period of time that I got introduced to Dr. James Dobson and got invited on a retreat. And it was that retreat that I was on that actually led to the accident that I had. So that's kind of a summary of, kind of my business career leading up to what happened about five years ago.
Yeah, and the story of this accident is just unbelievable. So please continue on and tell us what happened there.
Yeah, okay. So I had a small plane that I was using for business, a little prop plane, and I flew it from Denver up to Great Falls, Montana. I got in on a Thursday, and it was just this amazing gathering of people. There was about 14 people there that were all I think on the board or, close friends with Dr. Dobson. I got invited by a friend of mine who was in that circle, and was just really happy to be there. And on Friday we were going to go ride horses. Rick, are you a horse rider?
I haven't in years, but yeah, I have in the past.
So we were going to ride horses on Friday for lunch at the back of this big, huge ranch property and get, have lunch, get to know each other better. And I'm on this horse. I've done a little bit of riding, growing up, trail rides, things like that. And I was the first one saddled, and this horse starts trotting out into this big open area. And all of a sudden he just bolts and takes off and does like this 90-degree turn. And I'm laying flat on my back, and his rump is slapping me in my shoulder blades. And I was scared to death that I was going to flip off the back of this horse and get kicked in the head. Yeah. And I was squeezing with my legs as hard as I could so I wouldn't flip off the back. And little did I know, what do you think I'm telling the horse to do?
Stop,
go faster.
Man.
Yeah. Giddy up, right? Because when you squeeze it, I didn't know this, right? I hadn't read the manual. I finally got my weight back up on the saddle. My right foot is not in the stirrup. So he's going faster and faster and faster. And I'm looking ahead of mine, about 60, 70 yards in front of me is just a steel corral fence line. And it was kind of this L-shaped thing. The fence line was along my right side. I did a 90-degree turn. I was heading straight perpendicular to this part of it, and then it was clear off to the left. I was heading toward the area where the paddocks were. So I grabbed the horse's rein, the left rein, and I pulled on it to get him to turn, and he just pulls his head back, almost pulls the rein out of my hand. Couldn't believe it. I'm like, I'd flown in combat. I've landed on an aircraft carrier at night and in pitching seas, and I've done low levels and been lit up by enemy radars, and I had never felt kind of like I'm starting to panic.
Sure.
out of control. You're on this horse, it's just it's just fast. The wind's in your face. So I grab down and reach the rein, and I pull even harder. And he just pulls his head back even harder and doesn't even break stride. Now we're at a full gallop, perpendicular to the fence, and I just start panicking. And I'm thinking to myself, my brain is just, everything's just going, just like overdrive. Like, I could jump off this horse, but if I jump off this horse, I'm going to break my neck. And if I break my neck, I'm going to die. And I didn't even know what to think. Right. And I'm just kind of like frozen. I never even thought to pull back on the reins. I was told later by some horse people that it wouldn't have mattered at that point once they'd broken loose. And we found out later he's what's called a cold mouthed horse. He's very hard to control. He should have never been in a lineup with people that didn't know how to ride.
Sure.
But he had not broke. We're straight at this fence. And I remember maybe 15, 20 yards away from the fence, like everything just slowed down, total just slow motion. And I thought to myself, this is not going to end well. I remember thinking that. And then it was lights out. I do not remember hitting the fence. He came into the fence and he dropped his back end, and he bucked so hard he flipped over, slammed into the fence rump first. And when he did that, he launched me. And I went into that top 3-inch rolled steel bar face first. And it hit me from my teeth up across my left eye. And it crushed the entire left side of my skull. I lost 8 teeth. I broke my neck. I shattered, shattered isn't the right word. I broke my right shoulder and tore off all the ligaments, rotator cuff, everything else. The next bar down hit me across the chest. So I broke 4 ribs and punctured my left lung. And I woke up, I passed out. I woke up on the ground, and there was people holding me down, my neck, my shoulders, my hips. I could tell a woman was holding my hand. And when I woke up to a pain that I can't even describe, beyond my ability to handle, right? It says that God won't give us anything we can't handle. And this felt like this was beyond that breaking point. Like my entire head had been exploded. They're holding me down. My face is cut open. So this is hard for them. A head wound is pretty kind of ugly.
Sure.
And I'm yelling and screaming and writhing around. Thank God they're holding me down, because my neck was, I should have been a quadriplegic. We found out later. And all of a sudden what they saw from the outside was I relaxed so completely it looked like I was sinking down into the ground. One of the guys there thought he just watched me pass away.
Wow.
But it was in that moment. Another one of the guys there said, I felt like I should take my shoes off. Like I could tell God was here, and like this was holy ground, because it was in that moment I just felt God's presence. And it was the most intense, unconditional, and personal. This is between Jesus and John. This wasn't like just some general good feeling. I mean, this was a friend. Somebody asked me recently, what was it when you were first in God's presence? How would you have described him to you? I'm like, that's a great question. I think the first word that comes to mind is friend. And I remember thinking to myself, when I just felt this love, the first thought that crossed my mind, and I'm laying there, I didn't even know how bad I was broken and crushed, was I'm not worthy of somebody loving me like this. It was like the fabric of the universe was just made out of this love, and I was getting this privilege to touch it, but it was all about me and for me, and, reflecting back on it. And this changed everything about my understanding of who God is and what his nature is. It's like everything in my past, my history, everything that I've done, good, bad, or other, was not even relevant to this relationship that he already had with me, that he wanted me to be a part of and reciprocate with.
Now, had you been a religious man prior to this?
Yeah, when I got out of the Navy and that mentorship group, they led me to the Lord when I was 27. This happened when I was 45. But what I would tell you is I never really connected to this concept of a personal relationship. Right. And so I didn't really have that as like a true north. So I think over time, as I had different successes in business and accolades and things that I'd done, I kind of drifted off of that true north. And then a lot of it was, it's kind of what I was doing. Right. Like I'd put together my plan every year, my business plan, and God really wasn't included in that. And I kind of lift it up to him and say, hey, Lord, bless this. Right. And if I had a great year, I'd be like, hey, thanks, Lord. And if I didn't, I'd be like, come on, big guy. Right? Yeah. So, we'd go to church and, things like that. But man, there wasn't really a huge, that wasn't a big part of my life, although it was part of my life. But I would say I'd kind of drifted a bit. Not like the prodigal son level of drifting, but definitely, not in relationship.
Well, how did this accident and this experience for you, how did this change the trajectory of your life then?
Oh man, completely. Think about, here's something that happened. So I'm laying on the ground, and all of a sudden I'm in this pain, Rick, and this peace just starts washing over me, and it's rhythmic. It's like waves in an ocean. I mean, it was a presence, like laying in the sand at the ocean and being hit with the wave. It like spiritually was like that, and it almost had a color to it. I almost want to say purple, but it wasn't purple. And as this is washing over me, all that pain and panic and fear was gone, taken away completely. And then I heard God speak to me. It was this quiet, calm voice, which actually kind of surprised me. I thought it'd be kind of like this big booming voice, but I knew this was God. Like, it wasn't the James Earl Jones things, right?
Right.
And it wasn't to my ears. It like came from everywhere and nowhere. And what he said to me was, all things work together for good for those that love the Lord. At the time, I didn't know that was Romans 8:28. And then he said, I'm going to heal you and use this for my glory. And he said, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. As soon as he said that, I knew my left eye was permanently blind, which it is. All the bones behind the eye socket shattered and cut the nerve between the eye and the brain. So my left eye I still have my eye, but it doesn't communicate. So I only can see out of my right eye. And so I opened my eyes and I said to everybody, God's here. You don't have to worry. He said, it's going to be okay. And they're like, what? The woman holding my hand had been a paramedic. She said she's never seen anything like this. And here's what happened is, I get to the hospital. I ended up being in ICU for 6 weeks. And then I was at Craig Hospital, a specialty hospital here in Denver, with a severe traumatic brain injury for 20 months, 25 surgeries, very, very painful recovery. A lot of time to question, right? God, you said you were going to heal me, but this sure doesn't feel like healing. But in hindsight now, it was the healing and the pace that I needed to become the person that I am today. But there was an experience that I'll never forget. I was laying in my bed in the hospital, and I had post-traumatic amnesia because of the brain injury and the drugs, and they're waking you up every 2 hours for 6 weeks. Man, it's tough. I have very few memories, but I was convinced. The neurosurgeon comes in to talk to my wife and says, we need to do, this is a couple days after the accident, we need to do a full craniotomy and a brain surgery, or John's not going to make it. And what I'm hearing him tell my wife is, you know what, the chances of me making it are pretty slim. And I remember him saying to her that if I do make it, the chances of me not being the person that she remembers are pretty high. And then she asked Donna, Rick, if I had a will. And we had actually just redone our will. And he said, listen, we can wait till the morning. Can you call your attorney and have that FedExed up here so we can sign the will and the living will before we go into surgery? I'd be much more comfortable if we could do that. And I'm thinking to myself, even though I'd just been in God's presence, just everything going on, I was convinced the next weekend was my funeral. That was a certainty for me. And I started thinking about, what are they going to say about me? Everybody, at the front of the church, right? They're all going to say nice things. That's what, you do at a funeral. And I started thinking, hey, what are they going to say at the back of the church after the funeral service is over, right? When they're going looking for the potato salad and ham sandwiches. And what are they going to say a year later? And I started thinking of these two concepts. The first one was inheritance. And this is what you leave two people, right? Possessions, money, stuff. And, from that perspective, my wife and kids, and they're going to be fine. And I started thinking about legacy, though. What have I left in people? What have I left in my wife and in my kids and in this world? Have I lived my life in such a way that the use of my life would outlive my life? That people 5 and 10 years later would go, wow, that was the guy that changed the trajectory of my life because of the influence that he had. He saw something to me that nobody else did. He brought it out. He gave me the tools. He gave me he helped me to realize my potential. And I realized that was the person I wanted, that God gave me a second chance on this earth to stay here to become.
Yeah, religion can still be very debatable for a lot of people. Faith can be very debatable. Theology is a subject that can be very debatable. But when we have these kinds of experiences, it settles something inside of the individual. and takes us to a whole different place. And now you're living without any unanswered questions or detachment from, divine principles and destiny. I mean, just so many things change. Now, you named your business Beyond Influence. What's behind that?
A great question. A lot of thought went into that, right? Our mission statement, what came out of this, right? Instead of going and running companies and doing what I used to do, Rick, we started the coaching, the consulting, the training, the work that we do today with one mission, and that is, how do we equip and inspire leaders to accomplish what's been inspired in them? We want to be that catalyst. Instead of trying to be a king like I was trying to do before, I want to be a king maker. And so the whole thing about Beyond Influence is, if everybody listening to this and yourself, think about some of those people in your life that spoke those words into you, right? That saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself, that brought it out, that allowed you to, achieve a worthwhile goal or dream. And so we want to create leaders that live beyond influence. Like you, Rick, what you're doing, you're going to have an influence in somebody's life in a positive way through what you're doing here, with the TLB project and everything else you're doing, and with your book. And they're going to take that. They're going to have a positive influence in their own family with their kids. And you might not even know about it, but you are right now, you're an example of somebody living beyond influence. Because think about it, you sitting right there, and this is, part of this is what we call Project 100. You sitting there, Rick, you have a positive influence on 100 people, right? In the next 6 months, 2 months, year, in a way that those 100 people have an influence over 100 people in their lives over the next couple of years. You just sitting there touch 10,000 people's lives. And that is where every single person listening to this can absolutely be part of that. And what if those 10,000 people now go out and touch 100 people themselves over the next couple of years in a positive way, to have a positive influence? Each person here over the next, I believe, 3-5 years can touch 1 million people in a positive way. That is how we look. Do you think we have a leadership crisis in this world right now? Do you think we have some cultural problems? We have division, crazy divisive politics that are happening regardless of where you are on that spectrum. Man, there are some big problems that we need to solve in this world, economically, culturally, spiritually. And politics is not the answer. That's the direction I was heading in before the accident. I was going to run for Congress and Senate. That was the track I was on. And what I realized is working with real leaders who have influence in the lives of real people is where we can actually make a difference. And that's been our whole passion and focus. And then equipping leaders on how to do that, how to become their best self, help everybody around them to become their best self, and then bring that into an organization, a community, a culture, a company, a ministry, whatever it happens to be. And when you do that, kind of that inner game determines that outer game. And if you can work on some of those areas, it might be a little counterintuitive. I'll tell you that every single time when that starts to happen with a team, the measurable, concrete, like business results, growth, margins, profitability, turnover, whatever you want to measure, there's going to be an inflection point, and you're going to see every single thing that's important to you or a measure of success that you can measure just start to ramp up and to the right.
Yeah. Well, this was obviously the accident and everything around this accident was a defining moment for you.
Yes.
And I think we all have defining moments. They're not all going to, of course, be as dramatic as you experienced. But I also would like to communicate that it's not necessary that we all have these near-death experiences, to find our purpose and our passion and our meaning. And so, now that you have used this defining moment for you in such a powerful way, and you've helped so many people find their direction and find their path who haven't had such a dramatic experience, but relate about how this happens. How do we recognize defining moments?
I would say, here's a message for folks, right? I was, through this tragedy, the awareness and the realization that I was given a second chance, right? And it never felt like an obligation or a burden to live up to for me. I've talked to other people where they kind of felt that way, but I always felt like I was given this amazing, beautiful gift. And part of that gift is, Rick, I get to share it with people. The fact that they don't have to go through this. And I was sharing, this is part of, maybe why I'm here with a good friend of mine, about this whole concept of a second chance. And he goes, John, I would argue that every single day when we wake up, it's our opportunity for a second chance. It's the question is, are you aware of it, and are you going to take a hold of it? And here's what I tell everybody listening is, hey, guess what? This morning was your chance for that second chance, and you missed it. Here's the good news is tomorrow morning's another day. And what I would encourage people to do is really take some time. And this is what I had. This accident forced me to do this. And everybody I've coached and worked with who's taken the time to actually, I think you have to slow down to speed up, but to really understand, not only who you are, but who God created you to be. What are your gifts? What are your passions, your strengths, your skills, your values? And is that in alignment with what you're doing? And I think there's kind of three options for folks. First of all is maybe I'm not happy doing what I'm doing right now. And if you take the time to kind of go through this process and say, you know what, what I'm doing right now actually is in alignment with who I am. I just have to look at it differently or do my job a little bit with a different mindset or attitude, or maybe a little bit different role in the organization that I'm in. And now you are just putting jet fuel into the career you're sitting in right now. Maybe the other option is, you know what, I see this, I'm excited about it, but I'm not completely fulfilled. Maybe I want to actually focus some things on the side. Or like myself, maybe the choice that was right for me, and it doesn't mean it's right or wrong for other people, was to make a complete pivot and leave a traditional organization and start what I'm doing now, which is the podcast, the coaching, the consulting, and the training. And I love who I get to work with and the outcomes and the results I get to go with people. But it was a huge risk in the beginning, right? I hadn't had an income for 2.5 years. And I was stepping out into basically starting a coaching practice from scratch to support our family because my wife was not able to go back to work at the time. So it was a huge step out on faith with me. But I think that's what I would share with people is you know what, there's a script that we're all following. And I got this chance, this awareness that I could actually tear up the script and actually rewrite a different script that would be way more fulfilling and joyful and meaningful to me. And that's what I did. And that choice, it's a choice, and everybody has the ability to choose each day.
Yeah, you wrote a blog recently that I really appreciated. You entitled it, "You Don't Have to Be Rich to Live a Life Fully Alive." And in that, you were addressing some of what we're talking about. And you said, if you look carefully, you'll find people all around you who show few signs of life. And then you quoted Ken Davis. Ken writes, "They haven't flatlined. People haven't flatlined yet, but they've stopped singing long ago. Rarely do their hearts race in excitement over the possibilities held by a new day. They lurch through the darkness like zombies, clinging to memories of what life used to be, but deep inside, they long to live again." I think that was so descriptive of where, in terms of identifying where people are. Large numbers of people. But yet inside there is this potential and this spark and this thing that if they could just get clarity around it would change everything. So do you believe that every individual has a unique purpose?
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, I do too. So how, reflecting on some of your coaching, how do you help people find this purpose and this meaning in their own lives?
Well, yeah, I think what I've seen in a lot of people, Rick, is there's this limiting mindset around this whole concept of purpose, that it's this deep secret, right? Knowledge that's buried deep within, and you have to go through all this stuff to find it. And I think that's a a mindset that actually makes it really hard. Here's a different mindset: is what if the answer was actually already there and you're already living it out, and you maybe just haven't even just connected the dots yet? What if it's a lot easier than you think it might be? And here's what worked for me. So first of all, I started on myself. I started really looking at, hey, what am I passionate about? What are those things, those bright moments where I was, those moments in time I was just fully alive. And honestly, I didn't have a lot of those in my life. I had a few of them. And I had hey, what was it about that moment that brought me alive? What am I truly passionate about? And I sat down and I kind of did this thing and did this exercise. And I said, okay, here's everything that I'm really passionate about. And, I said, okay. And I'd compare one to the other one, and which one would, if I only could do one, which one would win? And I kind of made this list. And so I think that gives you this direction toward, finding this purpose and this calling. So this gives you this, but what I found is the passions don't have a value system, right? I might have a passion to be significant, and that's okay. What if God put that longing in my heart? It's okay. But if I tie it to myself, fulfilling myself, now it becomes ego driven. But if I want to be significant, to do something in the lives of other people, I'm recognized for that significance. That's different. If that makes sense. But I could go do something like, you've heard some of these crazy, there's been people who've done some really evil things recently. They've achieved significance, right? There isn't a value system there. So the value system comes from really understanding our core values and our core beliefs, and not our should, right? What I think I should be doing in the moment, or what is expected of me because the role that I'm in or the culture that I'm in. And people really need to, most people I have found are not really connected to who they are at the core, because those value systems, those are who we be, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the being then informs the doing. And then how we do that, those are then linked to actually getting some clarity on what are our strengths, maybe your spiritual gifts, your talents. A talent is something you do naturally. If I don't study or practice it, whatever, and I'm back in that situation 2 years later, man, I got it. It's just kind of, there's certain things some of us are good at, right? What do people always ask you a question about? One of my friends, if any of us have a parenting question, they go ask him, how would you handle this situation, man? He's just an amazing dad. And you start looking at these things, right? So that those passions give me that direction toward it. Those core values you're identifying, those are how you be. And, some of the great things that help you identify those values are the things that those times you've really been in conflict or stress or anxiety. I'll guarantee you're violating something in those core values or belief systems. And that can give you some really good insight on actually what they were, what were you violating that time. And those, those strengths, gifts, skills give you that energy on moving how toward that. And as I started looking at all those and say, what could I do that was in alignment with all this? And I looked at different business opportunities, things I could do for work or vocations and ministry, nonprofits, for profit. That, as I went through that zeroed me in on the work I'm doing right now today. I honestly feel like I'm at a level 10 in my passions and probably about a 9+ in my passions and 9+ in my strengths and skills. I'm always trying to move up into the right. I feel like there's always a little bit of room there for me, but
Sure.
That's how I got there. And that's how I work with my clients on getting there.
Family is so important. Not everyone is in a family at this moment, but family is very important. But also our personal relationships are important. What would you think are some key components of relationships? Because you talk about that too in relationship to business.
Well, I think, I've been married for 28 years. We've had our ups and downs. I think, I know in our marriage, right, I think my favorite definition of leadership, right, is those that are willing to lie down their lives, for other people. And that's not just a physical life, right? What if we actually laid down our agenda? What if we laid down our needs? What if we actually served, other people? one of the things that I did as I went through this process is I wrote that obituary that I would like to have said someday in the future at my eventual funeral. And what would my wife want to say? Right? That I never coached her, that she actually never read what I wrote. Like, one of the things in there is that I would want her to say someday that she always felt like the most loved woman in the world. That no matter what was going on in her life, it was safe to come have a conversation with me. It wasn't going to be an argument or a judgment or being annoyed or being snappy. Now, I fail all the time. But I think Abby, for me, having some clarity and actually putting her first, which maybe sounds a bit counterintuitive, but what I would tell you today, Rick, our marriage has never, after 28 years, has been better. We sit there on the couch and we snuggle. We walk down the street and hold hands. We talk about, life and kids and our future and dream and smile and laugh. And she does the same to me. She's reciprocated that back to me. It's like we're, trying to always outserve each other. And I think if you do that in business with your employees, I mean, that's my leadership philosophy, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. If I can help every single person around me, whether they're peers or they report to me, reach the highest level of success that they're able to achieve in that position, maximize their compensation plan, I know that through that, I'm going to succeed. That philosophy I've had since the military, where it was modeled to me, all the way through my business career, and it's always had some pretty extraordinary results. A lot of people, especially this younger generation, that seems pretty counterintuitive. But if they embrace that, man, they could change their company and their culture overnight.
Yeah, I love the quote by Maya Angelou that says, people will forget what you say and they'll forget what you do, but they will never forget how you make them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to incorporate that as just a part of, my thinking processes every day. I'm wanting to leave people with a feeling. They were glad they bumped into me. They were glad they talked to me. They're really happy, to have had the experience that I lifted them, inspired them, encouraged them. And so, I think when it comes to these relationships, for so many people, I think Kevin Niebel and I talked about this when he was on the program, but so many times people separate business from, like it's almost a separate life from who they really are. But really, it's an extension, should be an extension. And I mean, I don't know anybody that talks more about love when it comes to business than Kevin does.
Yeah.
And, I love the way, that Ford Taylor deals with so many of these aspects, and how these relationships are key components of advancing yourself and reaching higher levels and greater contentment and fulfillment and satisfaction. And so stepping on people leaves us without something that wanting to lift people provides. And so I think it's so important when we're trying to rewrite the scripts of our life that we take what you're alluding to here, and that is to put serving others as a part of not only who you are and what you do, but in everything about you. Care about that, the other person.
Yeah, a lot of people always ask me, how do you bring your faith into the marketplace? And you know what? You just need to live authentically, build relationships with people around you and just help them. And John Maxwell, if you've heard of John, right? He was my pastor back when I lived in San Diego. And I love something he always said is, you know what? Yeah, you have to connect before you can pull. So before you you can truly have a positive influence in somebody's life, you have to have a connection first. And I think we do that by finding ways to just help people, right? To love people, like Kevin talks about.
Yeah.
And Ford has been an incredible mentor in my life, and everything he's doing with transformational leadership that we've brought into our organization. So yeah, it's just, loving and serving other people has always brought incredible the reciprocation of that back to me has been 100-fold over anything I've ever given out. So I don't give and love and serve to get,
right.
But that's what's happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Because people don't understand that it's that principle. You really do reap what you sow, and when you're putting into other people, there's just a harvest for you, and there's a way for your life to change significantly. Um, so. You're also been an entrepreneur. So give us your definition of what entrepreneurship is.
You know what? It's somebody who's willing to just step out there and kind of put a lot on the line and take some risk. I mean, to go start a company, uh, you're gonna you have to be willing to fail. How's that? You got to be willing to go out there but I also believe to do it well, right? Go do it well thought out. It's got to be a calculated risk. So anybody that's entrepreneur, the times that I've really succeeded is when I've had some great mentorship, great counsel, great advisors around me, because there's, when you're building a company too, there's a lot of areas and you're cash strapped and you're just looking for that next client and you have all this stuff to do. Sometimes it's really hard to always be working in your strengths, right? You got to be doing the financial controls and the money and the books, and you got to be growing the business and putting processes into place. And it takes there's no such thing as I think a self-made person, right? You look at anybody that's accomplished anything great, there was a team around him. From Charles Lindbergh, right? People just see it as him, the guy. There was a huge team behind him, actually. But so I think, an entrepreneur is somebody who's not afraid to take some risks, but a good entrepreneur is also somebody that doesn't do it solo.
Yeah, so that entrepreneurial spirit it's a collective action. It's not just, okay, I'm going to do something, but you recognize it's a very lonely place when you've just run out there in the field and you're not attached, to. I mean, some of that is inbred, I think, in assuming the risk and what you really want to accomplish. But building yourself a network.
Yep.
Where you're interacting with people who actually want you to do well. They don't see you as competition. They're not. They've outgrown that, and they're working in completion rather than competition. And they're willing to advise and help and support and encourage. And sometimes that's all they can do. They can't necessarily pay your bills for you, but they can provide some strength and some wisdom and some experience. I think that moves us along. What would you say your leadership philosophy is then?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, back to what we were talking about earlier is, my success is going to be built on the success of others, right? It's about serving, giving. It's also about giving people permission to hold me accountable, holding other people accountable, setting goals. But back to that, rising tide lifts all boats. And so, and back to something you said, though, I remember about some of those people around you. Some of the best advice. One of my first mentors when I became an entrepreneur in my first business, you know what he told me? He goes, the person that you're going to be in 5 years is completely dependent on your association. The power of association was huge. He goes, your 5 closest friends. You're going to be the average of your closest friends. And also what you put in your brain. You got to reprogram your computer to be an entrepreneur. And he challenged me to read 10 pages a day on either, a personal improvement or a business book. And he handed me How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I know Kevin Knievel, he has basically that book memorized. But what I did though, Rick, is I sought out, I didn't ditch my old friends, but I sought out people that were entrepreneurs that I could, spend time with, understand their mindset, how they made decisions. And they became some of my closest friends. And when I had some, huge wins financially or deals or anything else like that were bigger than the things that they were doing all the time, they were the first people to congratulate me and high five and say, let's go out to dinner. And what are you going to do to celebrate? And having some of those people, like you said, right, that are not in competition with you. And they're not trying to compare everybody to each other. What they're doing is they always encourage me to compete with my own best self, and that is
Right.
what we should be doing.
Yeah.
So that was really some great advice for me that has paid huge dividends.
Yeah, maybe another time we'll talk more about the difference between completion and competition. I think it's a whole mindset. And I
Yeah.
love to talk about the difference between value and profit. Value is that
Yeah.
inherent thing that we all have,
Yeah.
that we recognize the sacredness of life in each of us. Profit is, that's something entirely different. And it doesn't speak to our value. Our profit is just our skill set. It's what we've learned. It's what we've crafted. It's what we've developed. And so that's a whole nother conversation. But I want to reflect on you mentioned politics already, and this is our landscape right now is so divisive. It's a very ugly time, in our country. But what's your take on where we are right now politically?
I think this might be a bit controversial, but I think what you're seeing, right, with in the landscape right now, there's a large number of people, and I was very involved in politics. That's actually how I met Dr. Dobson, that have a huge vested interest in the system not changing. What happens over time in every great society, what makes the society great is the power is put out into the people. And whether you look at Roman civilization and their pillars that they were built on, or this country and what it was founded on, what causes any civilization to crumble is that power gets centralized and it gets pulled back into a government. That's what's happening here. And whether you like Trump or not, what he represents is a movement of trying to bring the power back out toward the people and taking it away from some of the things that are happening in the government. That's going to be fought by the people in power tooth and nail. I think that is why we're seeing so much division. What I would encourage people to do every day is just pray for these leaders in this country, but get involved. Take a stand. I personally, myself, I support Trump and what he's doing. There's not everything that he does that I love. I'll tell you that right now. But his principles and where he's going toward, I think, are really important for this country staying a great place to live and work. I really do. So
yeah, you founded, and I think you were the former chairman, unless you still are the chairman of the Colorado Faith and Freedom Coalition. And I read there that that you guys started that to restore America's greatness, and that was before Donald Trump, was anywhere on the political scene. And
correct.
You were wanting to reestablish, our founding principles. And you ended up training and equipping a lot of people to participate in the political process. So
almost 6,000 people.
Well,
back then when the Tea Party was up and running. Right, we were providing training for Tea Party patriots, training on how to become politically active, how to knock on doors, make phone calls, just get involved at whatever. We were showing them how to do it, and we ended up making, on a very limited budget, almost 5 million voter contacts in that 2010 election. And here's something crazy. Think about it. So we stood for personal responsibility, limited government, putting the power of decisions back in the hands of the people, free market solutions, a lot of everything that's, very much in alignment with, constitutional principles. But here's something crazy just for people to think about, anybody of faith out there. Our outreach, Faith and Freedom Coalition, was to evangelicals and Catholics in Colorado. Self-identified evangelicals and Catholic are 65% of the population of state of Colorado, which is a pretty purple state right now, or I'm sorry, blue state. And only half of those folks are registered to vote. Only half of those folks vote in any given election. And only 60% of those folks that actually do actually voted for a conservative candidate. So our whole mission was if we could actually just educate people to vote on candidates, not have, certain litmus tests on social issues, but looking at their overall character, we could actually, we would have been able to flip just a couple percent movements in each one of those buckets. We could have flipped this state from blue to red overnight. And it got flipped from red to blue with very intentional work with exactly what I'm talking about from the other side over the course of about 4 or 5 years. I mean, this place went from red to blue because they engaged that 35%. So that's what we were trying to do to counter that. But I also came to the conclusion going through my accident that we can have a much bigger impact on culture and communities and actual lives of any group that you are passionate about helping by just getting involved and showing up as our best selves and pulling some other people into your passion, your vision, or joining somebody else's and throwing your energy and weight into somebody else's that's already up and running, that's in alignment with something that would be important to you.
Yeah, Roger Landry, the founder of TLB here, he hosts his own program, and the name of his show is Eradicating Programmed Ignorance. And I think what's happening right now is we are experiencing an awakening, and I think that people recognize that these politicians and the elite ruling class, the financial, engine that pushes so much of our political system has run us off course. We are a long ways right now from, our Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and the way that our government is running is so counterproductive to what this nation really was founded on.
Yes.
And so I think the time for people to, whether you're a person of faith or just someone who just simply cares about the country that you live in, I think the time for just burying your head and leaving our politics to our politicians has passed. I think people have got to become re-engaged in the political processes and recognize that it's the extremes on both ends that are carrying an awful lot of attention. But that when people have the ability to have dramatic impact, if they just will re-engage and care and get involved and take the power back that's been lost here.
Well, and something's happened with the political discourse. It's been, it's evolved, it's devolved. And here's what happens and it's happening on both sides.
Yeah.
And it's this identity politics, right? Sure. So I am pro-life, which means that if you are pro-choice, you're bad and you're evil. So we're not going to even have a conversation, right? I am, pro this or pro that, which means that if you are against that, I'm going to shut you down and call you names and get in your face. And this is happening on both sides. What used to happen is we would have a conversation and try to seek some understanding. Hey, why do you feel that way? Let me share with you why I feel this way and what's behind this, and question and have discourse around it. I think that really was exemplified with the success that Reagan had with his government and, working, across the political spectrum. And I would just encourage people that are out there to actually be willing to engage in a conversation with people that you really disagree with, and show them a model of actually having a dialogue versus what almost I see way too often, it just immediately turns into a shouting match.
Yeah, we've lost our dialogue into monologue. And in some cases, it was one of the professors that I listened to a panel discussion on Princeton about breaking the echo chamber. And he coined the phrase, it's just mostly joint monologues now, and it's just screaming, and there's no discussion there. I taped a show, it aired earlier this week, actually yesterday. And I was talking about this very thing, matters of fact, and how that civility is removed at the moment. It's like
there's no civility or comedy.
no,
Comity.
yeah, there's no, and civility to me is, it's the best evidence of mutual respect. And I can respect you because of the inherent human value that you have, even though, we can be radically different in our views.
Yeah.
But I refuse to see people as enemies, even when they're directly opposing, my particular view. And I want to see them as somebody that I should have a conversation with, like you're alluding to. We shouldn't just talk to people that agree with us.
Yeah, that's just reinforcing that echo chamber, right?
Yeah, that's right. We should be talking to people that are, directly opposing to us, and try to find, not just give them a chance to talk so that we can say, hey, I give you a chance to talk. But I mean, a real mutual exchange. I want people to know why I feel what I feel, why I think what I think, and, why these things are important. And I care about the country.
So here's a challenge for everybody listening. It's something, I don't know if you know who Foster Freeze is. He put this challenge out there. Um, is go find somebody that that you're in disagreement with on some pretty significant issues, and go invite him to have coffee and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I've done that with some of my friends that are hardcore liberals. They do not believe in God. They have very, very different views on social issues than I do. And I got to tell you, we've had some great conversations. And, I respect who they are at the core as a person, even though I very much disagree with their views. But you know what? You'd be amazed when you actually sit down with somebody, what the outcome can be.
Sure. Well, John, look, man, it was great to have you. I enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for taking the time to share your life with us. There'll be an article accompanying this show when it goes up, and all of your links will be listed. But for people who immediately want a way to connect with you, they can contact you through eternalleadership.com.
Correct.
Eternalleadership.com. And also, if you're looking to correspond with me, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at rickonlife@gmail.com. I want to thank everybody for joining with us today. And just remember, whatever's going on in your life, just sprinkle a little love on it. I'm Rick Amitin, and I'll see you next time.